What if Joffrey Baratheon was fostered at Winterfell? What if a single cup of wine, poured too late into the night, could bend the course of a kingdom? What if the fate of a boy who would be king turned not on prophecy, not on blood, not on the cold machinery of the great houses, but on a father's fear whispered into the ear of the one man he trusted? The Red Keep sits heavy on its hill above Blackwater Bay, its stones still warm from a summer that has not yet learned to end. Below it the city stirs and reeks, but here, in a chamber high above the noise, two men sit as they have sat many times before. Though never quite like this, Robert Baratheon is a king now. The weight of it has settled into his shoulders in the months since he took the Iron Throne, and he wears it as a man wears armor he has not yet grown accustomed to. Too tight in some places, too loose in others, chafing where he cannot reach. Across from him sits Eddard Stark, who does not drink so freely, who watches his friend with the patience of a man raised beneath a colder sun. He has come south for the royal progress, and he will return north soon, and he counts the days until he does. That is the thing about Ned Stark that Robert has never fully understood. The man does not want. He does not scheme toward more. He looks at the splendor of King's Landing and sees only distance from home. Robert drinks and speaks of his son. Consider the shape of a king's fear, for it is a peculiar thing. Robert has won a war. He has broken a dynasty and taken a throne, and buried the woman he loved beneath a mountain of grief he drowns each night. But when he speaks of Joffrey, his voice drops, and something uncertain moves behind his eyes. The boy is 8 years old. Already, there is a hardness in him that is not the hardness of the North, not the honest cruelty of cold winters and hard choices, but something else, something cultivated, something taught. He's growing into a Lannister, Robert says, and the word tastes of iron and gold in his mouth. Cersei whispers to him. Her father's men bow and scrape and fill his head with lions. I look at my son, and I do not see myself. He does not say what he fears. He does not need to. Ned understands the unspoken thing, that Robert looks at the child and finds nothing of the Baratheon in him, and that this absence terrifies a man who has already lost so much. And so the proposal comes, as such proposals always come, born of drink and desperation, dressed as inspiration. Send the boy north. Foster him at Winterfell. Let him be raised hard and clean, away from the poison of this place, taught to swing a sword and mean it, taught what honor costs. Tywin himself was fostered. Half the great lords of the realm were sent from their mother's halls to be forged in another man's hearth. It is not exile. It is honor. It is the making of a king. Ned does not want this. Understand that clearly. He sees at once the burden of it. A prince beneath his roof. A boy who is not his own. The eyes of the crown forever turned toward his gates. But he sees also the trust in it, and the trust is a thing Ned Stark cannot refuse. So he accepts, reluctantly, slowly, the way a man accepts a weight he knows he will carry a long way. Now watch the queen. Cersei Lannister learns of the bargain the way a lioness learns a threat has entered her territory, not from her husband's mouth, for he does not think to ask her, but from the corridors and the whispers that are the true currency of the Red Keep. And her fury is a cold and calculating thing. She goes to Robert, she argues, she reasons. She reminds him that the boy is her son, that the North is a wilderness of ice and savages, that to send the heir to the throne so far from the seat of power is madness dressed as sentiment. But Robert is drunk, and Robert is stubborn, and Robert has found in this idea a rare clarity he will not surrender. He invokes his authority. He invokes her own father's example, which is the cruelest cut of all. For she cannot argue against Tywin Lannister's judgment without arguing against the very foundation of Lannister greatness. She cannot object publicly without insulting House Stark and revealing the true depth of her contempt for it. She is boxed in, checkmated by a man who does not even know he is playing the game. And so, at the end of the progress, an 8-year-old boy is loaded weeping and raging into a Stark-escorted wain, his small fists beating uselessly against the wood. His mother leans close. Her lips brush his ear, and the words she gives him are not comfort. They are a blade wrapped in silk. "You are a lion," she whispers. "Never forget what you are, no matter how cold it gets, no matter what they teach you. You are a lion, and you will come home." The wain begins to move. What does a lion learn when it is raised among wolves? The question sits at the heart of everything that follows, and the answer is not simple, because the answer is being written every day in a cold gray castle at the edge of the known world, one small humiliation at a time. If you're enjoying this alternate history of Westeros so far, please consider subscribing as I upload new stories every single day. Now, let's continue with the story. The journey north is long, and by the time the wain rolls beneath the great gate of Winterfell, the boy inside has hardened his grief into something sharper. He steps down onto the mud of the courtyard, and the first thing Joffrey Baratheon does in his new home is take stock of it as his mother taught him to take stock of everything. Who bows? Who does not? Who stands too tall? He sees a castle of gray stone and gray sky, servants in wool and leather rather than silk, faces that regard him with curiosity but not deference. And this is the first miscalculation, the first crack in the foundation of everything he believes about the world. He expects the deference to arrive on its own, the way sunlight arrives at dawn, unearned and inevitable. It does not arrive. A stable boy takes the reins of his mount and does not lower his eyes. This is nothing. This is a boy doing his work. But to Joffrey, it is an insult so profound that his hand moves before his mind does, and he strikes the boy across the face, hard enough to split the lip, and then he says the words he has said 1,000 times in the Red Keep, and never once questioned. He tells them all that they will call him Your Grace. He is the prince. He is the blood of the dragon and the stag and the lion. He does not understand, yet, that titles are currency, and that currency only holds value where men agree to honor it. In the North, they do not agree. Word reaches Ned Stark before the boy has finished washing the road from his hands. And here the Warden of the North makes a decision that will shape years. He does not send Catelyn. He does not send a septa or a steward. He summons the boy himself into the cold gray solar where the wind finds every gap in the stone, and he lets the silence do its work first. Joffrey enters, expecting a lord who will flatter the son of his king. He finds instead a man of granite who looks at him the way one looks at a problem to be solved. Ned's words are few, and each is chosen the way a smith chooses a blow. In the North, he tells the boy, a high-born name buys you nothing but higher expectations. Respect is earned through deeds. A boy who strikes a servant has not shown strength. He has shown weakness, and weakness is the one thing the North does not forgive. Joffrey does not understand. That is the crucial thing. He is not merely rebuked. He is bewildered, because the entire architecture of his identity has just been declared worthless by a man who cannot be ignored, cannot be flattered, cannot be reached by any of the levers his mother taught him to pull. He leaves the solar humiliated, and humiliation, in a boy like this, does not soften. It curdles. Catelyn Stark watches the arrival with a different calculation entirely. To her, The boy is not a problem of manners, but a Lannister sleeping beneath her roof, a lion cub in her nursery, and every instinct her father sharpened in her recoils. Yet she is too clever for cruelty. She understands that the way to unmake a Lannister's arrogance is not to indulge it and not to abuse it, but to erase it, to fold the boy so completely into the ordinary life of her household that his specialness dissolves for lack of anyone willing to reflect it back. So she seats him at the common table with her own children, gives him chores in the training yard, and treats him as neither guest nor prisoner, but simply as another child in her care. Septa Mordane, caught between the courtly graces of the South and the plain hard truths of the North, wrings her hands and finds no purchase for either. And then there is Robb. Ned gives his eldest son a command, dressed as a request. Befriend the boy, Robb, who is generous by nature and dutiful by training, tries. Their first sparring session is a study in everything that divides them. Robb fights with the easy confidence of a boy who has been losing and winning against Theon and the Master-at-Arms since he could hold a wooden sword, and he does not spare his opponent, because sparing him would be its own kind of insult. Joffrey loses. He loses quickly and badly in front of everyone, and the tantrum that follows is not the tantrum of a poor loser, but of a boy whose entire sense of the order of the world has just been struck to the frozen ground. He throws his sword. He screams. He calls for someone to be punished. Sir Roderick Castle, gray of whisker and iron of patience, does not indulge a single second of it. He hauls the boy up by the collar and puts the wooden blade back in his hand and tells him to stand. What if the making of a boy is nothing more than the slow accumulation of mornings he did not choose? What if a soul is forged not in a single dramatic reckoning, but in the dull, repetitive weight of 1,000 small surrenders, each one so minor as to escape notice, until one day, the boy who stands is not the boy who arrived? This is the question the North answers, and it answers it slowly, because the North does everything slowly, in the way of glaciers and grudges. The first winter tests him the way winter tests everything, without malice and without mercy. Sir Roderick does not care that Joffrey is a prince. This is the first lesson, and it takes months to fully land. The Master-at-Arms wakes him before the gray light has crept over the walls, and there is no gold in the North to buy an extra hour of sleep. No threat that carries weight against a man who has buried 3 winters' worth of soldiers and does not frighten. Joffrey learns to chop wood because wood must be chopped or men freeze. He learns the particular ache of an axe swung wrong, and then, weeks later, the different feeling of an axe swung right, the clean bite of it, the log falling into halves. It is a small thing. He notices it anyway. He mucks the stables. A prince, elbow deep in the leavings of horses, and the tantrum this provokes on the first day is monumental, and it changes nothing, because the stables must be cleaned whether a prince rages or not. And here is the quiet miracle that Cersei, 600 leagues south, could never have engineered and would have forbidden if she could. The men-at-arms begin to nod at him, not the bow of subjects, the nod of men who have watched a boy do hard work and not die of it. Joffrey, who has spent his entire life surrounded by the flattery of people who feared him, discovers a thing he did not know he was starving for: approval that cannot be commanded. It tastes different. It tastes earned. The cruelty does not leave him. Let no one pretend otherwise. It thins. It goes quiet. It learns to bide its time, but it remains, a coiled thing beneath the new calluses. He is still capable of the sudden vicious remark, the smile that arrives when someone else stumbles. The North does not exercise him. It merely gives him something else to be, alongside the thing he already was. Then comes the boar. They ride out in the thin light of a late autumn day, Robb and Theon and Joffrey, and the hunt is good until it is not. A wounded boar is a calculation gone wrong made flesh, all muscle and terror and tusks, and when Joffrey's horse startles and throws him, he lands hard in the frozen mud and looks up to see his death approaching at a full charge. There is no Lannister guardsman here. There is no gold cloak, no red cloak, no sworn sword of House Lannister positioned by his mother's paranoid design. There is only Robb Stark, who does not hesitate, who plants the butt of his spear and takes the boar through the chest as it comes, the impact nearly wrenching his arm from its socket. Silence, after. The animal shuddering out its life in the cold. Joffrey on his back in the mud, breathing, alive, and understanding for the first time in his life that his heartbeat continues by the grace of a Stark. Not a Lannister, a Stark. The house his mother teaches him to despise saved him, and the house that swears eternal loyalty was nowhere near. He does not thank Robb properly. He is not yet capable of it, but something behind his eyes shifts, and Robb, who is watching, sees it and says nothing, because he is wise enough to know that some debts are paid in the not mentioning. The letters come all the while. Cersei writes with the regularity of a metronome, and every letter is a small war. Remember what you are. Remember what they are. The Starks are beneath you, cold and dull and treacherous, and you will one day rule them all. In the first year, he reads these words like scripture. In the second, he reads them like a language he is slowly forgetting. The distance does its patient work. Her contempt for the North begins to sound, in his ear, like the complaint of someone who has never chopped a log, or been saved from a boar, or watched their breath crystallize in the dawn. One night, late, the fire low, he says it to Robb, quietly, as if confessing a crime. He can barely remember his mother's face. He can remember the sound of her voice and the smell of her, but the face itself has gone soft and indistinct, like a coin worn smooth. And this troubles him more than he can say, because a boy is supposed to remember his mother, and if he cannot, then what does that make him? And what is he becoming here in this cold place at the top of the world? Robb does not answer. Robb is looking at the letter Joffrey holds, the newest one, still unopened, and he watches Joffrey turn it slowly toward the flames. What if the tragedy that set the whole board in motion never occurred at all? What if the fall that broke a family and lit the fuse of a war was, in this telling, only a boy climbing where boys should not climb, and slipping, as boys sometimes do? Consider the broken tower at Winterfell. In the world that was, it held a secret worth killing for. A golden-haired queen and her golden-haired brother, tangled together in the dust and pigeon droppings of a forgotten room, discovered by a child who climbed too well and saw too much. But that secret required a journey. It required a king riding north with his court trailing behind him, a queen among them, a brother in her shadow. And that journey required a purpose. There was no purpose here. Joffrey was already north. There was nothing left in Winterfell for Cersei Lannister to come and find, and so she did not come, and so the tower held nothing but old stone and older air. Bran Stark climbs it anyway. He always climbs. He scales the walls of Winterfell the way other boys walk its yards, and on this particular morning, with the frost still silvering the battlements, he reaches for a handhold that is not there. He falls. Not because he saw something, because a stone was loose, because gravity is indifferent to the fates of great houses. He lands in the courtyard with a sound that stops every heart in earshot, and for 3 days he does not wake. Now watch what happens in the vigil. Watch who sits at the boy's bedside in the long gray hours. Catelyn Stark, of course. A mother's grief needs no explanation. Robb, pale and useless with worry. And a third figure, one the household does not expect. Joffrey Baratheon, nearly 11, sits in the corner of that sick room with his knees drawn up, and he does not leave. He fetches water. He sits through the nights. When Maester Luwin asks him, gently, whether he would not rather be at his lessons, the boy says he will stay, and there is something in the way he says it that makes the old Maester pause. It is not performance. That is the strange thing. There is no one here to perform for. Bran is a second son of a northern house, of no use to a Lannister's ambitions, and still the boy keeps watch. The North has done something to him, and no one can quite name what. The letter comes while Bran still sleeps. A royal messenger, mud to the knees, bearing the king's seal. Robert wants his heir home. The boy has been gone long enough, the parchment says, and a prince belongs at court, learning the shape of the kingdom he will one day hold. Ned reads it twice. Then he does something calculated, something that will echo. He writes to Robert not as Warden of the North, but as friend, as the man who once shared a tent and a war, and he asks, 1 year more. The boy is thriving here. He is becoming a man worth crowning, and Robert, who trusts Ned Stark above all living souls, and who has never much enjoyed his son's company besides, grants it. Consider what this does in the Red Keep. Cersei receives the news in her solar, and she does not shout. She goes very still, which is worse. She has counted the years. She knows the arithmetic of a childhood, knows that a boy who leaves at 7 and returns at 12 returns a stranger. Another year is not a delay. Another year is a theft. Winterfell is taking her son from her one season at a time, and Ned Stark, honorable Ned, dull Ned, Robert's beloved wolf, is the thief. She does not weep. She begins, instead, to plan. A lion does not forget who took her cubs. And in the north, the season turns. Bran wakes. Bran walks. And Joffrey, growing tall now, grows into something the household still watches with careful eyes. A lordling comes to Winterfell in autumn, a boy of good birth and poor manners, and he sees Sansa Stark and calls her a little northern savage, a girl with dirt under her nails who thinks herself a lady. He says it laughing, expecting laughter back. What he gets is Joffrey Baratheon crossing the yard with his practice sword already drawn, blunt wood leveled at the boy's throat, and a voice gone cold as the wall itself, telling him to take it back or lose his teeth. From a high window, Ned watches. Beside him, Catelyn. Ned says quietly that perhaps the boy may yet be salvaged, that whatever poison King's Landing planted in him, the North has drawn out. Catelyn does not answer at once. She watches the golden-haired boy standing over the lordling, watches the way he holds the sword, watches the pleasure that flickers, just for an instant, across his fair face before he masters it. And she says, in a voice her husband does not like, that a lion, raised among wolves, is still a lion at heart, that the teeth are the same teeth, that kindness worn as a coat is not the same as kindness grown in the bone, and she is not yet certain which she is looking at. Ned does not answer. Below them, Joffrey lowers the sword. The lordling scrambles back, and somewhere south, a raven is already flying. What if a single death, far to the south, could set every piece on the board into motion at once? A man dies in his sleep, or perhaps not in his sleep, in a chamber in the Red Keep, and the tremor of his passing travels north along the King's Road faster than any horse. Jon Arryn, Hand of the King, is dead, and with him dies the last steadying hand at Robert Baratheon's court, the last man who remembered the boy the king had been before the crown made him heavy and hollow. The raven that Catelyn watched fly south carried nothing back so cruel as the raven that comes north now. It brings word of the death first. Then it brings something the North has not seen in 9 years. It brings the king himself. He does not come as a progress comes, with wheelhouses and singers and the slow theater of a royal tour. He comes riding hard, a widower of purpose, a man chasing something he can no longer name. He tells his companions it is duty. He tells himself it is grief. But the truth, sitting deeper than either, is simpler and more human than a king likes to admit. He is lonely, and the one thing in all the 7 kingdoms that Robert Baratheon wants, past the drink and the whores and the boar hunts that dull the ache, is his son, his firstborn, the boy he gave away. Consider the calculation Robert makes on the long road north. Though he would not call it calculation, he needs a hand he can trust, and there is only one man in the realm he trusts absolutely, and that man lives at Winterfell. He needs his son returned to him, aged and readied for a throne. He needs Ned Stark, and so the 2 errands fold neatly into one, and he tells himself the gods have arranged it, and he does not consider what it costs the men on the other side of the bargain. Cersei rides beside him. She does not want to. She has hated the North for 9 years the way one hates a locked room where something precious was left behind. Her son is in that room. Her son, her golden boy, the one bright justification of a marriage that has given her nothing else. And she rides toward him, already composing the reunion in her mind, already imagining how he will run to her, how he will be hers again, how the wolves will have failed to change what a lion is at the core. The gates of Winterfell open, and the king climbs down from his horse, and the queen from her wheelhouse, and they look for the boy. They find him, but he is not the boy either of them remembers. He is leaner. The soft petulance is gone from his face, burned away by 9 northern winters, replaced by something harder and quieter and watchful. He stands among the Stark children as though he belongs there, and worse than that, as though he wishes to belong there. When he greets his father, he does so with a courtesy so measured, so genuinely warm, that Robert Baratheon, hard drinker, hard rider, king who weeps for nothing, weeps openly in the yard. He crushes the boy against his chest. He calls him a man grown. He does not care who watches him cry. Cersei watches, and her welcome is colder than she planned, because her son's welcome to her is colder than she could have dreamed. He is polite. That is the wound of it. He is perfectly, distantly polite, the way a well-raised guest is polite to a stranger's mother. When he speaks of family, he looks to Ned Stark and calls him a second father. When he speaks of brothers, he claps Robb Stark on the shoulder. And when Cersei draws him aside, later, to remind him gently of his name, of his house, of the golden lion in his blood and all it is owed, he listens with a patience that is its own kind of refusal, and he tells her he knows exactly what he is. He does not raise his voice. He does not have to. And Cersei walks away from that conversation with a fury banked so hot and so silent that even she is a little frightened of it. The North has stolen her son, and she resolves, in that private darkness, that whatever the North has done, King's Landing will undo. In the solar, Ned and Robert speak as old friends speak, which is to say with grief and wine and the weight of things unsaid. Robert asks. Ned resists, and then does not, because duty is a chain forged of exactly this metal: old friendship, old debts, the plain truth that the realm needs an honest hand and honest men are few. He accepts. He will go south. He will bring his daughters and leave Robb to hold Winterfell, a boy made lord before his time, and it is agreed, over the last cup, that Joffrey too will return south to prepare for the throne that waits for him. None of them says aloud what this means, that the boy the North has salvaged is to be returned to the court that made him, that the lion, raised among wolves, is being sent back to the pride. Cersei, listening at the edge of the firelight, smiles for the first time since she arrived. What if a boy who had learned to measure a man by the calluses on his hands returned to a place where hands were kept soft on purpose? This is the question that greets Joffrey as he passes beneath the gate of the Red Keep, and it is a question he cannot answer, because he no longer speaks the language in which the answer is given. The city assaults him. He had forgotten its smell, the sweetness laid over rot, the perfumed masking of a wound that never closes. In Winterfell, the cold scoured everything clean, and a lie could not survive long in air that sharp. Here lies flourish. They breed in the warmth. They multiply in the corridors, and Joffrey, riding through them, feels the old part of himself stir and stretch, the part that had wanted to hurt small things, and he is ashamed of it now, in a way he was not capable of being ashamed before. That shame is the North's last gift to him, and it makes him a stranger in his own house. The small council receives him with the practiced adoration of men who have flattered kings and corpses alike. Pycelle bows and murmurs of his radiant growth. Littlefinger measures him with eyes that price everything. Varys says something soft and kind and meaningless. And Joffrey, who has spent years listening to men who said exactly what they meant and paid the cost of it, hears the hollowness beneath the honey and does not know whether to laugh or to grieve. He had wanted this once, the bowing, the worship. Now it sits on him like a wet cloak, heavy and cold and impossible to remove. He clashes with Jaime almost at once. The Kingsguard, gold and beautiful and certain, speaks of honor as a thing to be worn rather than carried. And Joffrey, who has watched Eddard Stark carry his own sword to the block of a deserter and wield it himself, because the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword, finds his uncle's easy contempt for the ideal unbearable. They speak, and it is a duel without blades. Jaime tests him with jests. Joffrey does not laugh. Jaime probes for the cruel boy he remembers, and finds instead a young man who looks at him the way a northerner looks at a broken oath. Something in Jaime tightens. He does not understand it. He tells himself it does not matter. Cersei matters more, and she moves fastest. She comes to arrange his household, to install her creatures among his servants, to weave the web she has always woven around him. And he refuses her, quietly, politely, absolutely. He tells her he will choose his own men, and she hears in his voice a note she has never heard before, not defiance, which she could crush, but distance, the wolf cold. Her son has been taken from her and returned wearing her son's face, and this, more than any open rebellion, terrifies her. She retreats to plan. She has always been better at planning than at loving. While the lions circle one another, the wolf digs. Ned takes up the hand's chain and finds it warm from the neck of a dead man. Jon Arryn began something before he died, and Ned, methodical, patient, incapable of leaving a thread untugged, follows it. A book of lineages, a bastard boy with black hair, another. All of Robert's seed comes out black as coal, black as the Baratheon that fathered them, and Ned turns the pages and feels the floor of the world tilt beneath him. He counts the children of the Queen. He counts their golden hair. He does the arithmetic that Jon Arryn did, the arithmetic that killed Jon Arryn, and he arrives at the same sum. Joffrey is not Robert's son. Joffrey is no king. Joffrey is the child of a brother and a sister, and every claim he holds is built on a foundation of nothing. And here is where this history diverges from every path it might have taken, because the boy at the center of the sum is not a stranger to Eddard Stark. Ned raised him. Ned taught him to hold a sword, and to hold his temper, and to hold, above all, his word. Ned watched the cruelty drain out of him season by season, like poison drawn from a wound. And now the truth demands that Ned name him a lie, an abomination, a thing to be swept from the board. He cannot do it, not cleanly, not the way honor demands. When he looks at the parchment, he does not see an enemy. He sees a boy he loves. So he hesitates. This is the fracture. In another life, he would move at once, tell Robert, force the matter. Here he goes first to Cersei, as he did before, to warn her, to give her the mercy of flight, because he cannot stomach the death of her children when one of those children is half his own. He confronts her in the godswood, among the trees that keep no gods for her. He tells her he knows. He tells her to run. And Cersei, who has spent every hour since the north, since plotting, looks into the face of the man who has just handed her time, and understands that he has made a fatal, tender mistake. She thanks him. She does not mean it. She begins, already, to count. What if the mercy Ned offered Cersei was the very blade she would sharpen against him? What if the tenderness that made him warn her was, to a mind like hers, simply an interval to be used? She counts the days as one counts coin, deliberately, without waste. And in the counting, she arrives at the same conclusion she reached in every life, in every telling of this tale. Robert must die before Ned's honor can harden into action. Robert must die while she still holds the board. The boar hunt is arranged the way all her cruelties are arranged, quietly, through hands that will never know whose purpose they serve. The wine is the instrument, as it always was, strong and sweet, and poured with a squire's earnest devotion. And Robert drinks it, because Robert has never in his life refused a cup that promised to make him feel young. He rides into the wood heavy and laughing. He does not ride out. The boar's tusks find the softness the wine has made of him, and the great stag of the realm is carried back to the Red Keep, leaking his life into the sheets, cursing, weeping, calling for the son he raised in ice and the son he did not. Here the tale turns from its familiar groove. Because Robert, dying, is a different man than he was. The years of Joffrey's fostering have worked on him too. He has watched the boy return from the north straight-backed and courteous, has heard the reports of a prince who does not scream at servants, who trains without malice, who speaks of duty as though he understands the weight of the word. And so when Robert calls for the parchment and the maester's quill, pride moves his hand where shame once moved it. He names Joffrey heir, his son, his boy. He believes it fully, because he needs to. But Robert has also learned to trust one man above all others. So the decree does not end there. Robert names Eddard Stark, protector of the realm. He does it out of love, out of the old bone-deep faith of the rebellion, out of a father's instinct to leave his son in the hands of the most honorable man he knows. He cannot see the trap he lays. He gives the crown to one, and the guardianship of the crown to another, and he does not understand that he has drawn a fault line straight through the center of the Seven Kingdoms. Two authorities, overlapping, contradictory, a king who is not of age, and a protector who knows the king is not the king at all. The ink dries, Robert dies, and the fracture opens. Ned holds the parchment and understands what most men in his position would not. He understands that the words on it are a lie sealed with a dead king's love. He understands that to reveal the truth is to unmake the boy he helped to raise. And here he makes the decision that Littlefinger will call madness, and Varys will call something worse, something almost holy in its foolishness. He goes to Joffrey, not to the council, not to the queen, not to the lords whose votes and swords will settle the matter. He goes directly to the boy, alone, because Eddard Stark believes, against all the evidence of the world, that the honor he planted in a Lannister child has taken root. He gambles everything on a single premise, that a boy raised beneath the weirwood, taught that a false claim is theft, taught that a lie is a wound one carries forever, will hear the truth of his own poisoned blood and choose to renounce it. It is the gamble of a man who does not understand that honor and blood are not the same currency. In his chambers, Littlefinger learns of it and goes very still. This is not how the game is played. A secret this large is a knife. You hold it, you sell it, you press it slowly against a throat until it buys you a throne's worth of favors. You do not simply hand it to the one person most destroyed by it. He thinks Ned a fool. He thinks Ned already dead and merely unaware of the fact. And in the shadows, Varys folds his powdered hands and grieves, quietly, for a man too good for the country he is trying to save. Joffrey listens. That is the thing none of them predicted. He does not strike. He does not scream for the guards. He stands in the pale light of the solar, and he listens as the man who taught him to ride, to fight, to hold his tongue and hold his line, tells him that he is the child of a sister and a brother, that the throne he was promised is built on rot, that everything Robert believed of him is false, and something in the boy breaks open, not into rage alone, into confusion so total it looks like grief, because the North lives in him now, alongside the poison. Two fathers war inside his skull. Ned's voice saying a lie is a wound. Cersei's blood saying take what is yours. He does not embrace Ned. He does not cast him down. He simply stares, trembling, a king and an abomination and a boy all at once, and says nothing at all, leaving the whole realm suspended on the silence of a child who cannot yet decide which of his makers to become. What if the whole war could turn on a single hesitation, on the pause between a mother's command and a boy's obedience? That pause arrives now, in the throne room, where the Iron Throne rises like a knot of frozen lightning, and Cersei Lannister stands at the foot of it with her sons and her lions and her secrets arranged around her like a hand of cards she does not intend to lose. She has calculated everything. She always calculates. The king is dead, Robert broken on the tusks of a boar he was too drunk to sidestep, and into the vacuum steps the queen, with a plan built long before grief could dull her. Janos Slynt commands the City Watch, and the City Watch is loyal to gold, and the gold, as it happens, is not hers. Littlefinger paid it. Littlefinger, who smiles at everyone and belongs to no one, has bought the 2,000 men who hold the walls, and Cersei believes she has bought them through him. This is her first miscalculation. It is not her last. She gives the order plainly. Ned Stark is a traitor. He has spoken treason against the crown, has denied Joffrey's birthright, has moved to seize the regency for himself. Take him. Take his household. And when it is done, take his head. Because a living Stark is a rallying point, and a dead one is only a story mothers tell to frighten wolves. The gold cloaks move, and Joffrey lifts his hand. He is on the throne already. That is the detail history will remember, that the boy was already seated when the moment came, already crowned in all but ceremony, and from that seat of blades he speaks, and his voice does not shake the way it shook in the solar. He says, no. He says the Lord of Winterfell will have a hearing. He says a king who kills the man his father named Hand, without so much as a word spoken in the light, is not a king, but a butcher wearing a crown. Where did he learn that phrase? From the north, from the long gray lessons at Winterfell, where justice meant looking a man in the eye before you took his life. The seed Ned planted years ago flowers now, at the worst possible moment for the woman who bore him. Cersei's face does not move, but her mind does. She sees, in an instant, the whole board tilt. If Joffrey defies her here, before Slint, before the court, then her authority as regent is a fiction, and a fiction that fails in public is worse than no fiction at all. She must correct him. She must correct him without shattering him, and so she does the one thing she swore never to do. She tells him the truth, low and fast, at the foot of the throne where only he can hear. She tells him what Ned already told him, that Robert was not his father, that Jaime was, that every claim he holds rests on a lie, and that the moment Ned Stark speaks in a hearing, in the light Joffrey so nobly demands, that lie dies, and the boy dies with it, not in body but in name, cast down as a bastard of incest, stripped of the crown, hunted by every lord in the Seven Kingdoms who would rather bend to Stannis than to a thing born of a brother and a sister. Mercy toward Ned, she tells him, is a knife you press into your own throat. And there it is. The trap closes, not the trap Cersei built for Ned, but the trap the whole realm builds for Joffrey, without meaning to. 2 fathers, 2 verdicts. The man who taught him honor now must be silenced for honor's sake, or the boy is undone. He grips the arms of the throne, and the barbs bite his palms, and he does not feel them. Watch how he decides. This is the moment the entire war is forged in, and it is forged not by armies, but by a single frightened child weighing his own survival against the only love he was ever offered clean. He does not free Ned. He cannot. The truth would end him. He does not kill Ned. He will not. Something in the north will not let him. So he does the third thing, the coward's thing, the compromise that satisfies no living soul. He strips Ned Stark of the handship. He orders him imprisoned in the black cells beneath the Red Keep. Not the block, not the sword, only the dark and the stone and the waiting. Alive, silent, neither pardoned nor destroyed. A wolf in a cage the boy cannot bring himself to open, and cannot bring himself to bleed. Cersei's jaw tightens, because a living Ned is a living wound. Littlefinger's eyes flicker, because a plan half done is a plan he can still bend. Varys says nothing, which is how Varys says everything. And Joffrey sits above them all, having chosen neither father, having become neither, only a king divided against himself before a single banner has been raised, a throne split down its center in the very hour it should have been whole. Outside the walls, riders are already saddling. The word is already moving north. A raven flies north through the cold, and the word it carries is not a lie, but it is not the whole truth either. Ned Stark, Warden of the North, taken, imprisoned, stripped of his office, held in the black cells beneath a castle he never wanted to enter. That is what reaches Winterfell. And what does a son do with such a message? What does a young lord do when he learns his father has vanished into stone and shadow at the hand of a boy he once fed at his own table? Robb Stark reads the letter twice, then a third time, slower, as though the words might rearrange themselves into something he can forgive. They do not. His hands do not shake. That is the thing to understand about him. He is 15, and he has never commanded so much as a hunting party, and yet his hands are steady, Because grief in a Stark does not tremble. It settles. It hardens. It becomes purpose. Consider the difference between this Robb and the Robb who might have been. In another telling, another turning of the wheel, the boy calls his banners with fire in his throat and vengeance in his chest, marching south to break the crown that broke his father. But this Robb grew up beside the crown. He wrestled it in the practice yard. He shared a bed of straw with it, on hunting trips gone long. He knows the boy beneath the crown, or believes he does, and belief is a heavier chain than hatred. So when Robb calls his banners, and he does call them, the horns sound across the north, the dire wolf rises over the muster grounds. He calls them not for war, but for weight, not to conquer, but to demand. He writes to Joffrey directly, not to the king, to Joffrey. He writes of the summers they were children together, of the oath they swore beneath the heart tree when they were 9 and 11 and thought oaths were forever. Release my father, the letter says beneath its courtesies. Release him and I will kneel. Release him and there need be no war between us. Remember what we swore. Remember who you were before the crown. And in the Red Keep, a boy reads those words and feels them like a blade turned slowly beneath the ribs. But letters do not stop armies, and there are other players moving now, players who care nothing for boyhood oaths. Stannis Baratheon knows the truth. He has always known it, has carried it like a stone swallowed whole, and now he speaks it aloud to the realm. Joffrey is no son of Robert, no Baratheon at all, a bastard born of incest, with no more right to the Iron Throne than any peasant's whelp. And Renly, younger and brighter and beloved, raises his own banners in the Reach, styling himself king with 100,000 men and a smile that wins hearts the way Stannis never could. Two brothers of the dead king, each declaring the boy a fraud. Here is where the pattern breaks. Here is where this telling diverges from all the tellings before it. Because the Joffrey the world expects would deny it, would rage, would call for tongues, would demand every whisper drowned in blood. But this Joffrey does something no one anticipates. He acknowledges the doubt, standing before his court, before the assembled lords still loyal, before the ravens that will carry his words to every corner of the 7 kingdoms. He says the words plainly. There are whispers about my birth. I will not pretend I have not heard them. And then he stakes his claim not on blood he cannot prove, but on the dying decree of the king who raised him, Robert's own hand, Robert's own seal, and on his own worth, the campaigns he studied, the justice he means to render, the king he intends to become. Judge me by what I do, he says, and not by what men say I am. It is a gamble. It is, perhaps, the shrewdest move of his young life, because a boy who denies everything can be called a liar, but a boy who admits the question and asks to be measured against his deeds is harder to paint as a monster. The rebels' propaganda stumbles. The lines they had drawn so cleanly begin to blur. But there is one player who does not care for cleverness, one player who has been moving toward war since before the first raven flew. Tywin Lannister marches. He does not march for Joffrey's honor. He marches for the lion, and Joffrey is the lion's cub, an asset, a claim, a piece on the board, worth the blood it will cost to keep. When his host reaches the Riverlands, his captains bring him a plan. Burn the villages, salt the fields, break the small folk so their lords come to heel. And Joffrey from King's Landing sends a raven forbidding it. No sack, no fire. These are to be my subjects when this is done, and a king does not rule ashes. Tywin reads the order. He sets it down, and then he gives the command to burn anyway. The villages burn. The word travels back south, slow and certain, and when it reaches the boy on the throne, he understands at last the shape of the cage he truly sits within. What if the war a boy inherits is not the war he wishes to fight? What if every victory won in his name deepens the very trap he cannot see until it has already closed around him? In the Riverlands, the young wolf is winning. Robb Stark, who had never before commanded so much as a hunting party, moves his host through the river country like water finding its level, and the lords who bent the knee to him bend it a little lower with each field taken. He splits his strength and feints and strikes where the Lannister captains do not expect him. The Kingslayer is checked at the fords. The western outriders are scattered in the wooded hills. Word of these things reaches King's Landing, not as rumor, but as arithmetic, a ledger of losses that no clever letter can revise into triumph. And with each entry in that ledger, the two great hosts drift nearer, the Crown's men and the Northern men, until the space between them narrows to a single day's ride, and the thing everyone has been dreading takes on the weight of the inevitable. It is Joffrey who asks for the parley. This surprises his own commanders, who expected a king so newly humiliated by his grandfather's fires to hunger for a battle that might restore his standing. But the boy has learned to read a board, and he sees that a battle here wins him nothing he wants. He rides out with a small guard and no banners but his own, and Robb Stark comes to meet him the same way. Two young men on a flat stretch of ground between two armies that would gladly kill each other for their sakes. They do not speak of the war at first. They speak of Winterfell, of the long hall and the hot springs beneath the walls, and the way the snow came sideways in the deep of winter. They speak of Bran, and Joffrey's voice does something it has not done in front of any Lannister. It falters, and he says he is glad the boy woke, and he means it, and Robb hears that he means it. They speak of the boys they were, the ones who trained together in the yard, and quarreled and made peace the way boys do, before crowns and cells and burning villages made them into pieces on a larger board. Then Joffrey makes his offer. He will free Ned Stark. He will restore his name and his honor, and send him north with an escort worthy of the hand he was. In exchange, peace. The wolves go home. The lions withdraw. The realm stops bleeding. Robb does not answer at once. He is weighing it. He is measuring the boy's face for the lie he expects to find and not finding it. Far to the south, in a solar high above the city, another player receives the news of this meeting, and to her it reads as a single word: treason. Cersei Lannister does not care that her son met with the enemy to free the enemy's father. She cares that he did it alone, without her counsel, without her consent, as if the regency she has clutched since the crown touched his brow were already a dead thing. She goes to Tywin. Together they arrive at the same cold conclusion by different roads. The king has slipped his leash. He was raised by wolves, and he has begun, at last, to think like one. And a king who thinks like a wolf is worth nothing to a house of lions. Cersei's counterstroke is a whisper dressed as concern. She lets it be known, in the right ears, that the king is not himself, that the Starks worked some slow poison on him in the north, some sympathy that has curdled into sickness, that a boy so long among enemies cannot be trusted to know his own house from theirs. Bewitched, the word goes, ensorcelled by Stark loyalties. If the king cannot see his true friends, then his mother must see for him, and the regency must hold the reins his hands can no longer be trusted with. It is a knife aimed at her own child, and she drives it in the way she does everything, precisely and without a tremor. Joffrey learns of it the way he learns of everything now, too late to prevent it, and just in time to answer it. And in that moment, The boy makes the choice that has been waiting for him since the day the first raven flew. He does not defend himself against the charge of loving the North. He proves it. He goes down into the black cells himself, torch in hand, and he stands before the man who taught him what honor costs, and he orders the chains struck off. Ned Stark walks out of the dark blinking at the light. In the throne room, before the court, before the whisperers and the schemers, and the men who serve whichever way the wind blows, Joffrey restores the name of Eddard Stark and names the accusations against him lies. Then he calls for his horse. He will ride to Robb himself, to broker the terms, king to lord, brother to brother, and as the gates open before him, he knows without turning that behind him, in a high solar, his mother and his grandfather have already begun to plan the ruin of a king who will not be a lion. What if a lion, having spent his entire life certain of his prey, discovered that the cub he had raised for slaughter had learned to walk beside wolves? Tywin Lannister does not rage. Rage is a squandering of resources, and Tywin has never squandered anything in his long and terrible life. Instead, he sits in the high solar with a single candle burning low, and he does the thing he has always done best. He calculates. He weighs the boy against the house. He measures loyalty against legacy, and he arrives, as he always does, at a conclusion that costs him nothing but a grandson he had never much loved. The reasoning is clean. It is almost beautiful in its coldness. A king who restores Eddard Stark, who names Lannister accusations lies before the full court, who rides north to broker peace, as though the crown were a favor to be traded, rather than a weapon to be wielded. Such a king is no longer an asset. He is a liability wearing a crown. And there is another boy, a younger boy, a softer boy, a boy who has never smelled snow, never learned to bend the knee to a wolf's notion of honor, never had his edges filed down by a Stark's patient hand. Tommen, sweet, malleable Tommen, who would sign whatever was placed before him and thank the man who placed it. Tywin does not finish the thought aloud. He does not need to. He begins to gather men the way a spider gathers silk, quietly, one thread at a time, each strand invisible, until the web is already woven. A word to this lord, a debt forgiven for that one, gold moving through channels no raven records. He does not move against Joffrey, not yet. He simply prepares the ground, so that when the moment comes, the fall will look like weather and not like murder. And Cersei. Cersei sits in the eye of a storm she helped to summon, and for the first time in her life she cannot see her way to the far side of it. Her father wants her son unmade. Her father, whose approval she has hungered for since she was a girl, whose ambition she has worn like armor her whole life, now points that ambition at her firstborn like a drawn blade. She could choose the house. She could choose the lion, the legacy, the certainty of Lannister supremacy, secured through a younger, gentler son. Or she could choose Joffrey, difficult, changed, distant Joffrey, who came home from the north wearing a stranger's calm and speaking of things like honor as though they were real. She had wanted a lion. She had gotten something she does not recognize, but he is hers. And the discovery that this matters to her more than she expected is the most dangerous discovery Cersei has ever made. She says nothing to her father. She agrees to nothing. She simply begins, very quietly, to watch the men her father gathers and to remember their faces. Down the black water, meanwhile, the storm has a sail. Stannis Baratheon comes, as he always comes, grim, righteous, relentless, a man who believes the throne is his by law and intends to take it by fire. His fleet crawls up the coast. His army darkens the southern road. King's Landing, which in another telling would have burned green in the harbor and drowned in its own wildfire cunning, does not reach for that weapon here, because the king who holds the city did not learn war from Cersei's fear or Tyrion's desperation. He learned it in a cold yard from a man who taught him that a commander who slaughters his own future has already lost. So Joffrey does not burn the bay. He negotiates. Riders had already gone north, and terms had already been struck. Northern aid against Stannis in exchange for lasting peace, in exchange for the reinstatement of Eddard Stark as Hand, in exchange for a crown that would owe the wolves a debt it fully intended to honor. Robb's cavalry does not come to break Lannister lines. It comes to hold a gate, and when Stannis crashes against the walls, he finds not a city eating itself, but a city defended with discipline, with sober placement of men, with a young king who rides his own walls in plain steel and gives orders in a voice that does not shake. The battle turns. The city holds. Stannis, bloodied and confounded, pulls back toward his ships, and it should be a victory. It should be the moment the young stag proves himself, but victory has torn something open that cannot now be closed, because inside the walls, as the fighting on the river ebbs, another fighting begins, quieter at first, then not quiet at all. Lannister men who answer to Tywin find themselves facing men who answer to the king. Loyalties that had been folded neatly inside the same banner tear along the seam. In the narrow streets below the Red Keep, Baratheon gold cloaks and Lannister soldiers eye one another across cobblestones slick with blood that is not yet theirs. And in the high solar, Tywin Lannister sets down his candle and rises and understands that the reckoning he had meant to arrange in shadow has been forced by the boy's own victory into the light. Consider the shape of a reckoning forced into daylight. It does not favor the schemer. Tywin Lannister had spent his life arranging matters in the dark, where the mechanics of power could be adjusted without witnesses, where a death might be a fever and a bargain might be a whisper, and where the man who won was simply the man still standing when the candles guttered out. But the boy had won his battle on the walls, in plain steel, in front of thousands, and now the daylight would not go away. It clung to everything. It touched the Lannister soldiers in the narrow streets and made them visible. It touched the gold cloaks who had ridden with the king and made their loyalty a fact rather than a rumor. And it touched Tywin himself, standing in the high solar, calculating, always calculating, arriving at the conclusion first and working backward through the logic to confirm it. The conclusion was simple. He had lost the moment. The lords of the realm are practical men. This is the truth that undoes Tywin more completely than any sword. They had come to King's Landing prepared to bend toward whichever power promised the least ruin, and they had found, waiting for them, a king who had defended his city without sacking it, who had held his temper when temper would have been easy, who had ruled the siege with the sober restraint of a man taught by winter rather than by gold. And beside that king stood Eddard Stark, whose word no man in the Seven Kingdoms had ever known to bend, testifying that the boy had governed justly, had listened, had grown. It was not a claim of blood. Ned made no claim of blood. He made a claim of merit, and the lords, weighing it against the cost of another war, chose the thing that would let them go home. Tywin understood this the way a chess player understands a board already lost. He does not overturn the pieces, he withdraws them. Word came to him in the solar, and he read it, and he set the letter down, and he did not burn it, because burning it would change nothing. He would go west. He would return to Casterly Rock, to the rock that had made his house, and he would rule what was his, and let the throne rule itself. It was not surrender. Tywin Lannister did not surrender. It was the recognition that the game had moved to a board where his oldest advantages did not apply. Cersei he could not take with him. She would remain in the Red Keep, confined to comfortable rooms, a queen mother whose son no longer answered to her voice. And this too was a kind of ending, the quiet closing of a door that had once opened onto every corridor of power. And so the peace was made. Joffrey Baratheon signed it himself, in his own hand, at a table where Robb Stark sat across from him, not as a defeated rebel, but as a friend, which was a stranger thing than either of them could have imagined years before, when a spoiled prince rode north, to be fostered by a man of ice and honor. The peace granted the North its greater autonomy, its own governance of its own vast cold lands, a recognition that the kingdom below the neck and the kingdom above it might be bound by loyalty rather than by fear. And Eddard Stark took up again the chain of the hand, not because the boy needed a keeper, but because the boy had learned to want good counsel and to know it when he heard it. This was Winterfell's true gift. Not a claim, a conscience. Understand what the fostering did and what it did not do. It did not make Joffrey's blood true. Whatever whispers moved beneath the surface of his claim moved still, and Joffrey knew it, and he chose to build his reign upon the one foundation that whispers could not erode, which was the consent of men who had watched him rule and judged him worthy. Stannis Baratheon would never grant that consent. He withdrew to his island fastness, rigid and unbowed, holding to the letter of a law that named him rightful, refusing forever to bend a knee to a king he believed a lie. And so Joffrey's reign would never rest easy. It would have to be earned again each year, defended not with the simple thunder of birthright, but with the harder, slower proof of justice done and kept. The realm settled into an uneasy peace, and uneasy peace is still peace. The years turned, Ned counseled, and Robb rode south to visit, and rode north again, and the boy, who might have been the cruelest king the Seven Kingdoms ever suffered, became instead a careful man who ruled, knowing that his crown was a question he must answer every day. The fostering had not spared the realm the burden of proving that merit could outweigh blood. It had only given the realm a king willing to carry it, and in the long nights, in a city that had learned to sleep without fear of its own sovereign, that willingness was enough, and the kingdom rested, and the cold that made him was, at last, a mercy. And this brings us to the end of this alternate history. If you enjoyed exploring how events might have unfolded differently, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. We dive into new stories from the world of Westeros every single day, imagining the choices, battles, alliances, and destinies that could have completely changed the fate of the Seven Kingdoms. And if you'd like to explore even more stories, our Lorekeeper members unlock a brand new exclusive alternate history every single week. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. What do you think would have happened next? Did this version of history end better than the original? Or would you have taken the story in a completely different direction? Leave your ideas in the comments, because many of the best future stories come directly from your suggestions. Thank you so much for watching, and for spending your time with me. I'll see you tomorrow with another alternate history from Westeros. Until then, peace out.